I wanted to discuss water and mineral rights because this was something that we were very confused about when we started this journey. And even though I'm certainly no expert at this point, I think I have a better understanding of it. Please understand, I'm no legal scholar, and I also haven't researched this for some time. This is just sort of my very vague, very dumbed down, generalized understanding of this. And since I think in analogies, what I'm going to attempt to do is explain how things work, explain it in an analogy, and then explain it again, so hopefully it makes sense to even the most simple among us, because it took me a very long time to understand this concept. When you buy land in a state like New Mexico, you don't get water rights or mineral rights. To me, this sounded like you can't have a well. You're not allowed to collect water. You have no rights. That freaked me out, right? And then the other thing was, okay, and no mineral rights. So if some jerk's just walking across my land and he finds gold, he just like gets to keep all my gold, or he can just start himself a mine. What the hell? That's not how it works at all. Most of these rights that we're talking about were sold off back during the Great Depression as basically a way for people to get income when they had no other source of income. So these aren't rights that like somebody bought in the 80s or the previous owner kept and didn't sell to you when you bought your land. This is just something that, for all intents and purposes, never existed, almost, if you want to say. It's almost sort of a fiction, it's a fantasy. So I'll try to explain that in an analogy, and then I'll come back around and see if I can wrap it all up. I'm going to use cars and licenses as an analogy. So imagine that everyone in your country can own a car. Anyone. As long as you have the money to buy one, you can have a car. Nobody cares. But if you want to drive that car on public roads, you have to get a license. But the state decided that cars are really bad for the environment and they wear down the roads and people aren't driving responsibly. There are too many accidents, there are too many deaths. So the state decided that anyone who wants to drive privately can go ahead and do that and they won't be, hassled too much. But anyone who wants to drive commercially at all, be that for Uber or Lyft or a commercial taxi company, or if they want to soup up their conversion van into a party bus, or they want to drive big rig trucks cross country, anything like that, you have to go to the state and say, hey, I own the vehicle, it's mine, but I would like to get a license to use it commercially. And the state weighs your proposal and says yes or no. Now, there's one extra added step to that, in that there are only so many licenses. So let's say you live in a state that only has 100 licenses. You have to find somebody who drives a taxi and is thinking about retiring, or somebody who's selling a party bus and the party bus comes with the license to use it commercially. Anything like that. And then you can take the license from the party bus and say, hey, I'm not going to use the party bus, but I want to tack this license onto my Mack truck. So let's take this concept back to land. I own the land, but if I want to use my water for a commercial water delivery service, I have to go to the state and find someone who's willing to sell me water rights, because at this point, all of the water rights in the state are purchased. There were only, let's say, 100. All 100 are being used. So I have to find somebody willing to trade, sell, negotiate, whatever, those water rights to me. And then I take that license to the state and I say, hey, I want to use the water under my land commercially, and here's the license I want to attach to that business model. And so then the state says, okay, well, you have the land and you have a license. You are allowed to use water commercially. And it's the same with mineral rights. So if we one day discover oil on the land or gold and we decide we want to dig for that, we have to go find someone in the state who is selling mineral rights and buy one of the limited number of mineral right licenses, and then go to the state and say, hey, we want to attach this license to dig to our land that we own so that we can legally dig for this thing. And this whole process just serves to limit the amount of things that are happening in the state at any given time, right? You can't destroy an entire state with everyone digging in their own backyard for oil if they're not legally allowed to dig for it. They have to go find one of the limited licenses. And so if only 100 people in the state are using water for profit and only 100 people in the state are drilling for oil, then you don't end up with a situation where the environment is being really seriously damaged by unregulated, uncontrolled, unbridled greed, basically. Because the land is so cheap in New Mexico, too. I mean, you could buy acres and acres and acres and acres and then just do whatever you want, and the state doesn't even really know that you're doing half of the things because you haven't registered your activities, basically. So, if you decide to buy land and you find that it doesn't have mineral rights or water rights, this may be the reason. I'm not educated enough on this issue to know if it's the same in all states that have this kind of system or if there are different systems for different types of rights in different states. This is just my understanding of generally how it works in New Mexico, and like I said, this is a very dumbed down, streamlined, bare bones kind of version that I could sort of invent for myself to wrap my brain around the concept. So now that we've discussed that, the question becomes, well, if you have no water rights, how do you get water? How are you going to have a well? And the answer to that is, we don't need water rights to have a well. Even though the state regulates the commercial rights, they don't regulate private use quite as much. We do have to register a well and put a meter on it, but where we're located, we get about 1 million gallons a year of use. Other than paying for the well, it's at no cost. We can just use the water freely. We did have to register for a private use permit, and there's a whole process for that, and our well driller, had to verify some things, and he came out and drilled us a well, and now we have water. Yay! But ultimately, I was a little scared at first. I was concerned that we weren't going to be able or allowed to have water. I didn't really understand the concept, and so I really wanted to focus on that for you guys and make sure that information is out there, because I had trouble finding it and grasping it and getting my brain around how that all works. So rest assured, if you buy land in New Mexico that doesn't have water rights, you can still drill a well, get yourself water, and you also have the right to collect as well. I know Colorado doesn't allow water collection in as many areas. Most areas of Colorado you can't collect water. New Mexico does allow water collection. The area we're in, we're not likely to see enough precipitation to be worth the cost of building a proper water collection system, but we might do some things like rainwater harvesting for the garden and whatnot. But again, there's 2 of us, 2 dogs, and 2 cats at the moment. For us to go through 1 million gallons a year, I would probably have to shower all day and night. I mean, I don't even know.